This is Nick Courage. I'm the author of Stormblown and Snowstruck, and today I'll be making croissants, or croissant. The thing about croissants is that they take a lot of rolling and a lot of butter, so if you're trying to cut down on butter or you don't want sore arms, this might not be the recipe for you. I'm using a recipe from King Arthur Baking, which calls for a two-part dough. The first part is making a yeast mixture called a sponge, so I'm going to make that and let that ferment for a little bit. Here's the yeast. Here's the yeast mixture. Rachel always makes fun of me for using a fork to mix instead of a mixing spoon, but that's just how I do it. Alright, that's the sponge. I'm using an electric mixer to cream the butter today, but you absolutely don't need an electric mixer to make these croissants. I've made these in kitchens that don't even have cooling racks, definitely didn't have electric mixers, and the croissants have come out fine. It is a lot of butter though. I'm gonna add some salt and some flour to make this creamy butter mixture. Okay, there it is all mixed together. I probably could have creamed it just a little bit longer. And I'm gonna mold it into about an 8" by 8" square. And then I'm gonna pop it in the fridge just so the butter doesn't melt. So it's gonna go in the fridge for about 30 minutes after I wrap it up. There it is. Okay, so now I'm gonna work on that sponge and finish the dough. A little bit more butter, a little sugar, more flour, a lot more flour. So when you're using this King Arthur baking recipe, if you feel like at this stage the dough isn't mixing together with the sponge, you can add a little bit more warm water, just a little bit at a time, until the dough feels right. You don't want it too wet though. Here I am kneading the dough. And squaring it out and wrapping it in some plastic to chill in the fridge for a little bit. And there's my pat of butter, my big pat of butter over my pat of dough. I'm gonna roll the dough out until the pat of butter fits inside of it and I can wrap the butter like a gift. And it's really important to seal those edges, maybe wetting your fingers a little bit, maybe using a little flour, just to make sure none of the butter seeps out. I thought of this after I made these, but I would love to make this next time without using saran wrap. And I think for that, I just use a damp tea towel or even a silicone bag or something, but I think a damp tea towel would work fine. So here I am, I'm starting to form the dough. And remember, the dough has that pat of butter that's folded inside, so I'm stretching the butter as well as the dough and trying to be really careful not to break the dough so the butter doesn't leak through. If the dough feels a little wet or if you start to see any tears, just brush it with a little extra flour. And I'm ready for my first turn now that my dough and butter is all rolled out. The turn is just folding the dough and creating layers and then rolling it back out again. And I'm gonna do this a number of times in the recipe to give the croissants as much flakiness as possible, as many layers as possible. This is also called laminating the dough, giving it layers. So here I am folding it again, and then I'm gonna wrap it up and put it in the fridge so that the butter doesn't melt and leak out. So here I am unwrapping my chilled dough so that I can roll it out again and fold it again and give my croissants just a few more of those flaky layers. This seems kind of fast in the video, but it is a lot of rolling and a lot of chilling. And you can see the butter sort of starting to peek through a little bit. It hasn't broken through the dough yet, but when you see that, you just sprinkle a little extra flour on there. There we go. I'm gonna fold it up. Turn it again, roll it out. This whole process of laminating the dough and giving it all those layers is why people choose not to make their own pastry dough or think it's really hard, but I promise you, these croissants when they come out of the oven are so delicious, it's 100% worth it. Okay, oh, and then I get to wrap it up one last time, and there I am, I'm so proud of my dough. And then I get to let this sit overnight, which is a great part of this recipe. It gets really puffy overnight. And I'm only actually gonna use 1/2 of this dough today. So the rest I can save, I can freeze it or put it in the fridge and make more croissants another day. So it's doubly worth it. Check out all the layers in that dough thanks to all that rolling and folding. All right, so I'm gonna go wrap my other half up and put it in the fridge. And now I get to really start making my croissants now that the dough is ready. So I'm gonna roll this out, flour it down a little bit so that the butter doesn't break through. All those layers are now flattened into that little ½ inch of dough. Using a pizza cutter is a real game changer when you're making croissants. I've done this with a kitchen knife before, and it's just so much easier with a pizza cutter. Cutting off the edges there, because those edges, those folds, are going to keep the croissants from rising in the oven. Okay, so the recipe is very confusing at this point, so I would refer to a visual aid when you're cutting your croissants. I don't worry too much about getting this part perfect. I just kind of do it rough and ready and roll the big part into the tiny part to make a cute little croissant. Now these are going to sit out a little bit, they're going to chill a little bit, and they're going to have a chance to rise before I put them in the oven, but we're looking to make a cute little breakfast croissant here. One note at this stage while you're rolling the croissants though is to just really make sure that that tiny point is pressed into the bottom of the croissant, because as they cook and expand, they can unroll in the oven. I'm just laying these croissants on baking pans that have a sheet of parchment paper in them. They're looking good. Murray thinks they're looking good. Murray thinks they're looking really good. So here I'm making an egg wash, which is just 1 egg and about a tablespoon of water. When you paint the egg wash on top of the croissants, and you can just use a damp paper towel if you want to, that's going to give it a nice brown color in the oven. And here's Rachel helping me paint the egg wash. You can do this really messily. It doesn't matter if you're neat or messy, just as long as you get that egg wash on top of your dough. Once these are painted, they're ready to pop in the oven at about 400 degrees for about 30 minutes, but you're going to want to keep an eye on them because they bake fast. Oh, look at those layers. They're golden brown, they're flaky, delicious. That's all that lamination in the dough coming through. Perfect. For more of my bakes, check out nickcourage.com, and if you're interested in a Cooking with Courage shirt, check out my TeePublic store, which I've linked to in the description.